Hi, welcome everybody. This is the third in our composer series for the Boston New Music Initiative. I'm Beth Rattay, the artistic director, and today we're here with Ingrid Stölzel, a wonderful composer from currently in the Kansas City area for a long time and teaches at University of Missouri, Kansas City. And we're just super excited to have her and to learn some more about her beautiful music.
Awesome. And just quick correction, University of Kansas. So that's not, two different places, but close to each other. So hi, Beth, and hi, everybody. And thank you so much for asking me to talk about my music today. It's always special to share, especially with other musicians. And so I'm originally from Germany, and I've lived in the Kansas City and now in Lawrence, Kansas area for a long time. And I'm associate professor of composition at the University of Kansas. So I'm going to share my screen and do all that real quick. Share sound. And give me just 1 second. So I thought I would just, it's always difficult to narrow down a topic, when, but I thought I would talk about my vocal chamber music and sort of my creative process when it comes to writing vocal chamber music. It's one of my absolutely favorite things to do. And I thought I would specifically talk about a piece that is very near and dear to my heart. The Gorgeous Nothings. It's a song cycle of 5 songs, and it uses Emily Dickinson fragments. And the recordings that I will be sharing today, I just wanted to acknowledge these wonderful performers that you see on screen here. Sarah Tannehill Anderson, soprano, Annie Genoyak, flute, Margaret Marco, oboe, and Ellen Summer, piano. I'm very fortunate to have worked with these 4 wonderful performers for a long time. And this came together partly because of this collaboration. Wanted to share how it all happened, like the Emily Dickinson fragments and sort of my creative process behind it. I wrote it in 2016, and I was physically browsing the Kansas City Public Library. Yay, public libraries. I hope to do that again very soon. I haven't been back since the pandemic in a library, but there's something for me about when I'm looking for text. I love going to the actual physical library and sort of just seeing what things I'm attracted to. And so this is what happened with this piece. I was in the library in the poetry section, and I came across this book. I mean, the spine of this book called Emily Dickinson, The Gorgeous Nothings. And I was immediately drawn to the words. That was my first thing. And then I pulled out the book, and then I saw these envelope fragments. So this book is actually a facsimile edition, and it has 52 envelope fragments in the book, full color. As you can see, this is the book cover. And with it was that particular book, wonderful collaboration between a visual artist, Jen Bervin, and a Dickinson scholar, Marta Werner. And I was just immediately like sucked into their world in this facsimile edition. The idea, like I said, the words I was drawn to, the idea of Gorgeous Nothings spoke very deeply to me. For me, it's this how I think of life, kind of like these innumerable moments of really nothings that are absolutely everything in life, be it watching a sunset, and, it happens every day somewhere that we can see. I mean, it happens everywhere. Every day, but not always can we see it. Or birds, groups of birds, wheels of birds moving together. It's just, these are what I think she means by Gorgeous Nothings, Dickinson. And to me, those are the things that make up an amazing life. And so I was drawn to those words, but then also the images of these fragments. They range really from completed, self-contained, short little poems to like thoughts, unfinished thoughts, hastily sort of written on scraps of paper, anything she could find. And to me, I think it gave me a glimpse into what I think was Dickinson's creative process, and it opened up something in my own creative process. And maybe also because of the very nature of the incompleteness of a fragment, it kind of allowed me to engage with Dickinson's words in new ways. It gave me a little bit, perhaps more freedom than setting a poem that's been published and written about and all of that. So I will talk a little bit about the kinds of freedoms I took. So the first, before I even started writing any music, I spent quite a bit of time figuring out, well, which fragments would create a cycle that would have, variety. I wanted definitely to have variety in these songs, but also have some sort of overarching theme and shape. And the first decision I made was to use the envelope that actually has the phrase, the gorgeous nothings. And you see it right here in front of you. And really, the envelope is, made up of three sort of parts. She wrote, Dickinson wrote, in any sort of direction. So you have like this part here and this part here, and a separate little tiny piece of paper, this little triangle right here, that she pinned to the envelope. So obviously she clearly intended that to be read or connected in some way to this fragment, to this envelope of the other two things. So I'm just going to flip it for you real quick. And so right here are the words that really has the gorgeous nothings. She says, afternoon and the west and the gorgeous nothings which compose the sunset. So so that was the first decision I made, is to use this particular envelope with the words the gorgeous nothings. So as we're not Dickinson handwriting specialists, I have for you the transcribed text right here. And I just thought, after I speak, like I just did about the song, I will play it for you. And so here it goes. So I hope this sounds okay. Beautiful soprano. Just as we're composers on here, I just want to say I started this project and because because it was fragments, I'm like, oh, it's probably free and not copyrighted. But I just want to say that pretty much everything by Emily Dickinson, except her one published book, is still copyrighted. So hence the epic permission down here from Harvard University Press. So that's just a little practical thing. So I had to pay to use these. The second song in this short live is all contained on this envelope flap that you see right here. And isn't it, I just think it's amazing. You know, obviously it came out for her in this, and she had to grab this little piece of paper. I think it is a finished, to me, it's really a finished poem. And I'll just read it to you real quick. In this short life that only lasts an hour, how much, how little is within our power. And every time I hear these words, they're just so powerful. And my goal as a composer was to capture that emotional power, but also sort of this brevity, right? It's not an epically long poem. And then also everything about this envelope comes down to within our power. And power is sort of separate. She ran out of space right here, but it's also a really a wonderful visual that I kept in mind while composing this particular song. And this is very rare for me, but this piece came out exactly in one sitting. And again, it's short, right? It's like it's a minute song, so it's very short, but it came out and it never changed. Usually I'm a heavy editing and rewriting and reworking, and everything has to be manipulated, you know. But this one, it was very unusual for me, and it just came out, and I never touched it. I believe I was just so inspired by both the words, but also just being sort of part of Dickinson's creative process. I'll play it for you. It's very short.
In this short life that only lasts an hour, in this short life that merely lasts an hour, how much, how
And I should mention that when I was looking at fragments, often what I realized is, you know, Dickinson would give sometimes multiple words or cross things out. And so I did in this particular case. I decided, because neither of the words only or merely were crossed out, I just repeated the sentence, you know, the first time only and then merely. Using both of her words. When she, in some of the fragments, she did cross out clearly a word, then I wouldn't use it, because I felt like in her process, she had already made a decision that that wasn't the right word. Um, so, so the third song actually does not come from the envelope collection, but I started doing a sort of a deep dive, and I encourage all of you to do this, into the digitized Emily Dickinson archive at Amherst College Library. She wrote on all kinds of scraps of paper, envelopes being some of them. But here you see the back. This is some kind of advertisement, that obviously came in the mail. And she wrote on the back of that. And there are two texts on here. And again, here you can see some examples of things being crossed out, etc. And I used the second text. Scholars had written about this particular fragment, and they felt like these were separate entries, maybe in the same sitting, but not belonging together. So I felt very confident only using the bottom part. I felt at this point, I had decided on two of the fragments, like the one that I just played for you, and I felt like there was sort of an overarching theme that that was appearing. And now, of course, I was looking for fragments that would complement that overarching theme. And for me, it's sort of this idea of both beauty and possibility of spiritual transcendence. Dickinson writes about these kinds of things a lot. And also, as I was reading a lot of fragments, I recognized also she's really quite funny at times. And so I thought it would be, as the third center song of a 5-song cycle, I wanted to stay with the general theme, but also feature what I consider to be her very specific humor. This text, I interpreted, you have it here transcribed. Paradise is no journey because it is within. So she talks about, of course, to me, I interpreted that as we are constantly, and this is a very contemporary, I think, thing we're still doing. We're looking for happiness, for paradise outside of ourselves. And then at the end, she says, and so that journey is very arduous because we're constantly looking for something outside of ourselves that really can only happen on the inside. And so to me, the last line was just really funny because, as the servant conscientiously says at the door, we're out always. So we're always out. We're never inside of ourselves. So I think that's a really particular humor, and I tried to capture that, plus that arduous journey that she talks about. So a couple of ways I did that, just a couple of snapshots of the music, setting up this floaty piano texture with a very free oboe line above, and then really the vocal line has really gigantic sort of leaps to again, for this arduous journey that we don't even need to have this journey, because if we just stayed within, we would find paradise there. And then I'm setting a clear sort of texture shift as I get to the last couple of lines, and maybe you can see on the screen, I'm asking the singer to exaggerate the swooping, to kind of really exaggerate for the audience the humor that I believe is here in Dickinson's words. And I find humor actually very difficult sometimes to do in music, and you need really good singers. And then if I were to show you a video right now, I think it would even be funnier, because mostly singers emote all of this with their faces. But I find video through Zoom is not always the best quality. So I'm just going to play the audio for you. And just so you have the text in front of you, here it is.
at the door, we are out always. Invariably.
Okay, so the fourth song, also very short. I have the little fragment here. And again, I used one that is not an envelope from my original inspiration. I was super drawn to this fragment right here for a variety of reasons. So I put the dimensions down here. So it's really, it looks way bigger than it actually is. Like it's maybe like 45 millimeters, so, not quite 2 inches wide. And again, what I was drawn to is, how few words were, across. Like when we think about sentences, we think about, much more words in a row. So she uses the space. And then also there's this like unfilled space down here, right? And to me, that also signaled and kind of just got my own creative juices going that, because also it wasn't going to be the last song. I could sort of have the song sound finished without being, or ending without sounding done, if that makes sense. And so with this particular one, I was very playful with my setting. And so I thought I would first play it. You have the words here, and then just show you a few things that I was doing in the score. But I'll just play it real quick, just so it makes more sense when I show you a little score fragment. Here it comes.
The little sentences, the little sentences, the little sentences, the little sentences, begun, the little sentences, the little sentences, begun, and never finished. The little was a dog. 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 And never filled.
So to me, it ends sort of, not completely finished. And then, obviously, you just heard it. The first phrase, or the first part of the fragment, I said in complete unison, and I repeat obsessively. I took quite a few liberties with repetition, and again, I think it goes back because these are fragments. I felt a little bit more like I could be playful with this kind of thing, because sometimes for me, I'm just in awe of poets and I don't want to mess with things, and here again, I don't think this is not a published poem. This is a thought, unfinished, that Dickinson wrote on a little scrap of paper. I felt like I could be very playful myself. And so I repeat this the little obsessively, but I have this kind of process that I, so that it's both, I guess I was looking in the repetition for both balance between what's expected and what's unexpected, or, predictable and unpredictable. So I started messing really with the space between the repetitions. And especially as there's nothing else going on, it's just all unison. So that space, every time the little repeats, that space becomes shorter and shorter. And so you see, we went from 5/8 notes to 4/8 notes. And, I just keep doing that process, 3/8 notes to then 2/8 notes. And to then, when we finally get the full, and I should say, let me go back. I also split, the words. I end on "b," which is not, not something I would naturally do in text setting, but I'm delaying the full sentence being said. And so I even at the very, moving towards the first kind of cadence, I then don't repeat the little, so that we have the sense of urgency into that kind of first cadence. But you see, everybody is basically just playing the same thing. And again, that balance between the predictability and the surprise in the second phrase. Of course, I'm doing a composerly thing by varying the direction of my motive. I'm also digging now, right? We're digging a well, so I'm going down. But also the other important thing for me was now the space that was empty, right, where there was rest, is now filled with the counterpoint and our instruments for the second phrase, and filling that space. And I just had a lot of fun with that. So I know somebody's chatting. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's for me. I can't see it in my setup. So Beth, if it's a question, would you unmute and ask it? If it's for me, unfortunately, the way my setup is, I can't see.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay, awesome. And so for the last song, and then I will be done. I just wanted to give another shout out to Martha Werner. And I say her name way too German. Martha Werner. I think, she's American, and sorry, my tendency is always to pronounce names German, for her amazing scholarship, because she has, you see a website here where she writes extensively about these fragments and related texts, and it's just amazing. And, she specializes in this. And I was in touch with her during this project. I asked permission, even though titles are not copyrighted. I asked her permission if she's okay if I call my song cycle The Gorgeous Nothings, which is the name of her book. And so she said yes. And anyway, I just wanted to give another shout out to her for her amazing scholarship, because of her, I had this incredible thing happen for my last song. So I just, she had made literary and connections from my first fragment to the one that I am sharing with you. And it's her belief that they were probably written very close together in Dickinson's life. And so these are the fragments from my last song, the fifth song. And you see, this is a brown paper bag. And again, she had other little scraps kind of pinned to that brown paper bag. But it was through Werner's scholarship that I realized I made connections between these two fragments. I would have never on my own made these connections. And so you already heard the first song. I just kind of want to draw your attention to some of these literary connections that I also then, played around with musically. So in the first song, or in the first fragment, she talks about clogged only with music. And here it becomes thronged only with music. It's wheels of birds. I do this because I see these birds in Kansas all the time doing their amazing dance in the sky. And here she calls it decks of birds. And then to me, the connection between the afternoon in the West and the gorgeous nothings, which compose the sunset, to me, that poem draws on the cyclical nature of a day, versus she's drawing here on the cyclical nature of the seasons. And so I made lots of connections between the two songs, and I feel like it creates, even though I played you each individual song and I talked about it in between, my goal is an overarching whole in a concert hall when we get to the last song, that people kind of feel like it is finished. I just wanted to show you just one little score excerpt, how I very similarly set music. It has a rhythmic, a variety in the fifth song, but the pitches are very similar, and even the contour of clogged only with and thronged only with, the contour of the line, up, down, up is absolutely the same. And then I'm hinting back also at this motive in the piano, hoping that this hushed places like figures in a dream, that we're sort of remembering back to the first song. That was my hope, at least by setting, having these outer movements. So I will end my presentation with playing this last song for you. All right, did I stop sharing? Yes. Well, thank you for listening and letting me share this song cycle that I still care about a lot.
Oh yeah, this was just a super treat to hear you talk about that. These are just, they're gorgeous. They're like 5 perfect little gems. They are.
Thank
I think
you.
that they're like just the marriage, of you and Emily Dickinson. It was like I think it was the perfect voice for this, like your compositional voice for these. It was great. And the singer, she has it's unusual in a lot of sopranos to have kind of that bright clarity, I guess. A lot of operatic ones have, sort of this, I don't know what it's sort of like bright and clear as opposed to like bigger.
Yeah, and this is probably one of my most popular vocal chamber pieces. So I've heard many sopranos, and it works with a big voice too. It's very different, of course, but sometimes having this really operatic, big voice is also can be, it changes things, of course, but it's also powerful. So I'm open to all kinds of voices. But Sarah Taniel Anderson and I have worked together a long time. And so, I think she also really gets me, and that's always very helpful. Yeah.
So what I would like to do, time. Okay. Is I'll let you like Richard said that he really liked your shorter phrases on that this is from the chat on the 4th movement. I thought that was very effective. It had he liked it. And I also will chime in and say, yeah, it was really effective and it had a very organic feel to it.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, I don't always do that with poets, and I know all of us as composers, we think about these kinds of things. What kind of liberties can we take with other people's words? So.
And Molly Shun wanted to say that it was so beautiful. What a delight. So
thank you.
So what I would like to do in the next few minutes is open up the floor, see if anybody has any questions specifically about this or about Ingrid's music in general. Anyone like to chime in?
Sure, I'll start with a question. Just simply beautiful. What a gorgeous, it's like your music is always so stunning, but these pieces are just really spectacular. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about it. So it's clear that you spent quite a bit of time with the text before you set each of these songs. Can you describe some of the process after that went into each of these pieces?
After the selection of the 5 fragments, or
right?
Honestly, once I spent so much time picking the fragments and really also agonizing over which ones to use, because there's so many. I mean, there is really still so much out there that I felt like I already had the writing itself then came very quickly. Like I said, one of the short pieces came in one sitting, which is very unusual for me. And then I just felt like they were already my best friends, these fragments. I had made some decisions already, like the humor and how I wanted to capture that. And the 4th one, the little sentences, honestly, it was one of those where I teach on the 1st floor at KU, and then I teach, so that's my office, and then I have to go up to the 4th floor. I always take the stairs. And as I was walking, I had this idea of what, and honestly, I would tell my students, don't emphasize the little, right? I mean, I'm doing something anti what we would teach our students to do, right? Don't emphasize the word the. But there was something obsessive. I wanted to have this obsessive, the little, something that gets stuck. And I felt like this thought was stuck in Dickinson's. And so why I'm saying this is I felt like I already had all of these processes at work while I was picking the fragments, that the actual writing was really quite effortless. And it's not always like that, I wish. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Leah?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we got you, Richard.
That's Richard. I'll just amplify my text chat. I liked the fact that the rests between the repeated phrases get shorter and shorter, because that's a very effective way of increasing the attention, increasing the involvement as things get briefer and briefer. That's a good technique.
Yeah, and it's I have to say it's one that I use often. I don't often do unison writing, I mean, that was very unusual for me, but as we learn in our music education, we often increase intensity towards a cadence. The traditional composers have done that harmonically by increasing harmonic rhythm, but we can increase any kind of thing that creates that drive. And so to me, shortening those distances had that effect, especially as there wasn't a lot to hang on to. There was no harmony per se, implied harmony, of course, but not, I wasn't writing chords under that cute little motive. And so, yeah, I'm glad you perceived it that way. And that was certainly an intention, especially with such simple material. Yeah, thank you, Richard. Yeah.
Anyone else want to jump in? Questions? I'll throw a quick question. Do you find, this is a very general question, but you could talk about this piece specifically. Do you like to work sort of horizontally, like with lines, or vertically with harmonies, or is it sort of both the same at the same time?
I'm definitely a melodist, and I was very embarrassed about this for many years in my life because, I grew up in Germany, and I don't know how much people know, but writing melody as a composer was not necessarily something that was encouraged. It still is not. And so it's something I struggled with, just letting myself write melodies. That's what I'm good at, but I felt like that wasn't good enough for some reason. I don't know. This is a big topic. Thankfully in America, I felt like, and that's why I moved here, and that's why I've made a career here, is I feel like we can support many different kinds of styles here. I love all kinds of music. I just don't write all kinds of music. I write this particular very melodic, tonal kind of music. And so for me, I have to say it's always melody that comes first. It doesn't mean that the first melody is what I stick with. I grew up with a singer. My dad was a singer. And so often my first melody is too predictable, too maybe, nothing against 4-measure phrases, but maybe, that's what I grew up with, a singer who, sang traditional repertoire, and it's in my ear. And so sometimes I let myself just write the obvious, and then I go back and I'm like, is this the best I can do melodically, and that's where the shaping and the really, for me, is the finding that emotion, that melody does something to me. It's just, we sing to babies, and Leah will soon. And you have kids, there's something so intimate and so organic about just singing and melody, that I strive to capture that, not complicated, but also somewhere between, simple and highly expressive is where I want to land, so melody is first for me.
Yeah, I really noticed. So yeah, I listened to a big chunk of your music just to prepare. So I had, a good background on you. And one thing, it just is very, in general, your music is very melodic and expressive in a way that seems effortless, I feel. I'm not sure exactly how to put that, but it feels organic. And then when I saw some of the scores, I was like, it actually is really complicated, or, it's not just blah, 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 but when you're just listening.
Yeah. And, you put your finger on something that I think I've been working out for the last at least 15, 20 years, which is I used to write, much more, it looked simple. And I didn't get the result because I was like writing, let's say, what I would imagine like a Brahms, like how you would interpret a Brahms melody. When you listen to a violinist play the Brahms violin concerto, they're constantly doing these little things with note values, right? Like we have words for it, like rubato, or but I can't do that. I can't write a word on every note, right? And what they did with me is they played it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Like it was so boring. They didn't do any of that. And so I became highly complicated, rhythmically complex for several years. And people couldn't believe how hard my pieces were to play because they listened to it and it sounded like totally normal, right? Because I started writing out rubato. I started writing out, no, you're holding that to the 32nd note and then you're releasing, and then because that's how I really heard it. And I painstakingly wrote out the rhythms. Now I'm somewhere in between. Like I went from really crazy rhythmic notation, and people are like, if you don't have mature players, it will also not sound exactly correct, to like trying to make it look like what I want and still not have the level of complexity that honestly people, especially with large ensemble things, I mean, I played a chamber piece, but people just don't have that rehearsal time. So you have to find that sweet spot. And I feel like I'm still searching for that sweet spot of notation, because the way I hear melodies, I think, is I constantly stretch and contract the beat. That's how I naturally hear. And I think that's how people played music in the past. They just don't play contemporary music like that. Because with contemporary music, it's metronome specific, play this complex thing. So I think you put your finger on something that I've definitely been, I've been swinging in different directions. I'm still learning, and I don't know if I've mastered it in any way, but the organic sort of unfolding of a melody is extremely important to me, and it impacts the shape of the whole. And I think about energy a lot, like what's the energy of a line and where does it want to go and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's like really nice to hear you talk about that. Yeah. That's something I struggle with my own music. I'm also a very melodic writer. And yeah, I've had that where it looks really simple, but then what I want it to sound like is not. So yeah, I'm struggling with that too. Probably far behind you, but.
No, I mean, I think it's a difficult decision. And yeah, I love our new music specialists, but we've taken out sort of expression sometimes, and people have learned to be really very detailed in their performance, and I'm impressed people can do it. Like, like I follow scores and I'm like, how did I count this? There's so much stuff out there.
It's super impressive. But yeah, I also, like as a performer too, I also play flute. I don't want to play everything perfectly. I want it to have expression.
Yeah.
Found it kind of boring. Yeah, boring to not do that.
Interpret. And yeah. I know these are big composer questions for sure.
Yeah, existential composer questions.
Yeah, and the limitations of notation and communication.
Right.
I find that's every time I do something, oh wow, I thought that was clear. Clearly, it was not clear. I mean, we all have these moments, where we are in our heads and we think we've worked it out, and then a performer looks at it and it's like, oh, I'd never thought this could be not clear,
Yeah.
Lifelong, definitely learning.
Well, I also would like to ask you a little bit about, as I said, I'm a flutist and I listened to Leonardo Saw the Spring and it was gorgeous. I definitely am going to try to perform it at some point. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, and I was very tempted today to talk about my use of text with purely instrumental music, but it also, these pieces are longer. I knew I could share the whole cycle because it's a nice and short cycle. But yeah, that has poetry as, I love using poetry for instrumental music. Perhaps I'm cheating a little bit, the empty page syndrome, and I just don't want to start with nothing. But this particular piece has as its inspiration a ekphrastic poem. So a poem written about a piece of art. And so there's so many layers of like people interpreting. Yeah, so you have both the poet, I had the poet, which I thought was Michael Fields, because that's how I found the book. And then the poem is about a Leonardo da Vinci flower sketch, a study of a flower, which I've seen in person myself before. And in itself, again, a sketch of flowers is the creative process, somebody working out some things. And then the added, like, absolute fabulous addition, once I did research, I had already picked this poem. And then I looked at the cover, and it said pseudo, it had a PSD. I'm like, pseudonym, I think that stands for pseudonym. And so I looked up, and it was actually two women writing in collaboration these poems, but published under a man's name. And to me, that was like yet another kind of layer, especially as I was writing for flute and piano. And so now suddenly I had two perspectives in the poems themselves as well that could be expressed in the flute and piano part. It was just magic, and I also feel like, again, I had all this other material to inspire what the sounds I was going to make. There's the emotional landscape, there's this idea of Leonardo da Vinci, a completely different time period, this inventor. He actually, did you know he invented some flutes? He invented a glissando flute, kind of like a penny whistle, but he has sketches of glissandi flutes. So I also like incorporated some, sliding in and out of stuff. But yeah, I do deep dives into, I read all about him and all about the poets, and it feels like I already know so much, even though I haven't written a single note. And for some reason, that gives me confidence to then write, because that piece is, I think 12, 14 minutes long, gives me that confidence that I have enough to say, so I use other people's poems or art, and it helps me create, it inspires me.
Cool. Well, I'll open the floor if there's any last questions. Anybody wants to share? Space.
I'll ask. I was just chatting that I've just commissioned a choral work from somebody who's a jazz pianist. It'll be his first choral composition. And I'm just curious, Ingrid, because I don't commission work very often. Do you have any tips for me as a commissioner, or a story about your favorite commission and how much freedom versus constraint you appreciated?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think it's not being asked enough, because I think, mostly I have to tell you, I when I get commissions, people say, oh, we want a piece this long for this instrumentation. And then sometimes maybe they tell me what else is on the program, which I really like personally. I like to know the context of the premiere, etc. But as you asked, what is my absolute favorite commissions, I'll tell you this experience. And no, I've only had one like this where I really felt like, wow, this is thoughtful. It was from actually where Beth is living in the area, Abiquiu. It was the Abiquiu Music Festival. So Abiquiu in New Mexico is where tiny little place. But Georgia O'Keeffe had her Ghost Ranch there. That's why people know it. And they played a piece of mine, an existing piece of mine, on the festival 1 year, and then had already told me they want to commission. And for inspiration, they organized a like it was 5 days, a a stay at a ranch in the middle of a canyon, totally away from civilization. There was no internet, there was nothing, because they wanted a piece that was inspired by the area. So they actually just like threw me in the middle of a canyon in this. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, there was electricity because they had solar panels, and there was a compost toilet, and I had some amenities. But after the initial freak out of being like all alone in the middle of a canyon, it was the most amazing experience, because they gave me the gift of inspiration, right? I knew what I was going to do. And after I came out of that canyon, and it was really thoughtful, and it fed my, because as artists, I think as composers, we feel like we output all the time, and what's sometimes missing. And I think that's why I'm looking for art and poetry. I need other things to feed me. And so that particular commission, I know it's not always possible to do that, but I just want to tell you, it was incredibly inspiring, and I felt really fed as an artist. Like my creative energy was like restored. It was really lovely. So that's my best story of a commission.
That's great. How long did they let you stay out there in the
It was
canyon?
4 nights, 5 days, but enough to kind of really unplug, and the stars. Oh my, I mean, I've never seen anything like it, because it was completely away from everything. I had to be picked up, by like some crazy cheap, because it's like this getting there. And if there's rain, you have to go by horseback, but there was no rain. So I think that would have been a little too much too quick for a city girl, but yeah. So that was my favorite. Yeah. But if you can think about input as well as the person, I think that is really helpful. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ingrid. So we are out of time, but it was amazing to talk to you. I'm so glad we had you here. I want to let everybody know about our upcoming events. Our next salon series will be April 20th at 6 p.m. If you are a composer that you want to share your music or just come see other people's and chat with us, that's April 20th at 6 p.m. And then our final composer interview series of the season will be May 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern time with Malika Fitzhugh.
Yeah, cool.
So that'll be, you can find out if you're interested in that. We'll be posting at bostonnewmusic.org/tickets. Those will be up there. Again, both are free to participate. So, and then, if you're in Boston, we're going to be having our Living Music Summit with 3 days, 3 concerts, 3 days of music, June 3rd through the 5th. So we're really excited about that. So, all right. So thank you to everyone for being here. And just again, thank you, Ingrid. It was wonderful to chat with you. It was lovely, lovely to hear your music.
Thank you so much for asking me. Bye, everybody.